Okay, we've got a media conference now with the Greens' Adam Bandt. This is also in relation to the Fair Work Act Amendment Bill.
This is our last chance to Abbott-proof people's rights at work before the election, and we should grab that chance with both hands. The Greens, of course, have got balance of power in the Senate. I'm one of the 7 members of the crossbench in the lower house. The government needs 5 of those to get its legislation through. 2 of those 7 have just declared their hand a short while ago, but that means that it is still well and truly possible for legislation to pass the lower house and the Senate. The Greens are prepared to work with the government over the coming days to ensure that we use these last few weeks of Parliament fruitfully, and we use them to Abbott-proof people's rights at work. The proposals that the government is suggesting have been on the table for some time. They've been well and truly aired and discussed. It's by no means a matter of putting things through at the last minute. It's doing something that's well overdue and that the government should have done before. So the Greens will be prepared to work with Labor to ensure that we can see some good reforms to the Fair Work Act over the next 3 weeks. And I would urge Labor not to now give up on the prospect of Abbott-proofing people's rights at work, and to work with the Greens and the other members of the crossbench to get this legislation through.
Who have you spoken to among the crossbench, obviously apart from Mr Windsor and Rob Oakeshott, about putting through the Fair Work Amendment?
Well, I've only just heard what Mr Windsor and Oakeshott said just a short while ago. I saw it on television when they made their announcement. But I've heard other members of the crossbench make some quite supportive announcements when it comes to protecting people's rights at work. And indeed, on a number of matters, there have been members of the crossbench sitting on one side of the chamber trying to protect people's rights at work, and Labor and Coalition sitting together on the other on a number of divisions we've had over the last few weeks. So I would expect that really, I mean, it's ultimately the government's job to talk to these other crossbenchers, and they'll then make up their own minds. But you would have to think that, as with other pieces of legislation, it needs the 5 votes, and there are still 5 votes in play.
What's your understanding? There's some question from the Labor camp whether Mr Oakeshott and Mr Windsor were saying they would not support the current legislation before the Parliament, or whether they were in fact talking about further amendments that would introduce some form of compulsory arbitration. What's your understanding of the situation? Have they pulled all support?
Look, I don't know. You'd have to ask them. I heard their press conference and I understood them to be talking about the bill. If they're talking about further amendments, then that means the prospect of the bill getting through is that much higher. Yeah.
Well, if they are saying effectively that they won't support anything that doesn't have bipartisanship, and if they are saying that they won't support the bill in its current form, I mean, surely they are sort of giving the coalition sort of a victory on IR before an election.
Look, Mr Oakeshott and Mr Windsor have their own constituencies, and it's up to me to give them advice or run commentary on what they're doing. From the Greens' perspective, the Greens aren't prepared to let Tony Abbott, months out from an election, dictate what's in and out of our country's industrial relations laws. So we're prepared to work with the government to Abbott-proof the Fair Work Act.
Have you met with Peter Slipper, Bob Catter, Andrew Wilkie, Craig Thompson to discuss that with them, their views? Do you intend to?
Look, not recently. Of course, this announcement's only quite recent. It's I'll wait with bated breath for the government's announcement about where they intend to go from here. I would just be urging the government not to throw their hands up and say it's too hard, because it seems the numbers are still there, and anything we can do to assist that, then of course we'll work with any other parties to ensure that we get some good reform through.
But just so I'm clear, if you haven't spoken to other members of the crossbench, how do you know that the numbers are still there?
Well, there's still 2 members of the 7 have declared their position. That's 5 who haven't, and it takes 5 to get legislation through. Thanks very much.
It appears he's being asked another question there. We might just stick for this other question.
The Association is saying that the government is making their decisions on a whim. Do you have any comment and on whether you'll be supporting the government or the coalition on that matter.
Yeah, the Greens have been pushing for some time to see good, well-protected marine parks in our country. The government's gone some way towards that, and we won't be helping the coalition in their attempts to undo some pretty basic environmental protections. I mean, this is an indication now of what happens if Tony Abbott wins in September. It'll be open slather on the environment and open slather on marine parks. So the Greens will continue to be very strong defenders of marine parks.
What's your take on today's news poll? Are you concerned what this means?
Well, if the polls that we've seen now for a number of months hold up, we're heading for an Abbott government in September, and the question is how big will the majority be? The real issue that comes out of today's polls is whether Tony Abbott will have total control of the parliament after September, and the Greens, we're doing everything in our power to ensure that we are there as a backstop to not only take the fight up to Tony Abbott, but be able to stop some of his more extreme changes that he's wanting to put through. So it really does now, I think, begin to focus people's minds on the importance of voting for the Greens, because that is going to be your best insurance against what the polls are saying will be a Tony Abbott government in September.
Are you still confident of holding your seat, Mr. Bandt?
I am. It'll be a tough fight. I need to get about a third of the swing that we got last time, and then we'll be in a position to win even if Labor and Liberal collaborate on preferences. I'm getting really good feedback from people, and look, and I believe that the Greens have to be in a position where we can win lower house seats in our own right. That's in order to be firmly the third party in Australian politics. So that's what I'm aiming to do, and I'm feeling good about it. Thanks.
Was the Lower House Greens MP Adam Bandt there. That was live from Canberra. The Greens are still keen to see the government's proposed reforms to the Fair Work Act get through. Earlier this hour, we heard from independents Rob Oakeshott and Tony Windsor saying they will only support the initiatives if those initiatives have bipartisan major party support. Time for sport now with Amy.